And 24 by 24 continues live now.
Hi, everybody. This is Esther Kustanowitz. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, and I'm here with Salvador Litvak, who's coming to you from Israel. So this is a truly international and diverse phone call that is now being transmitted to you live via the magic of Google Hangouts on air, and the good folks at 24 by 24, the Global Day of Jewish Learning. So some of you may be having a little trouble getting to us, but we're so glad that all of you who are here. I think in some ways, the Global Day website has been having some problems with too many people trying to access all of the Jewish learning. So again, in terms of problems you're going to have in your life, that should be your biggest problem, is what I wish for all of you, although hopefully no website problems for any of you. So anyway, we're going to get started today on a topic that's really interesting, and I think that I hope that you'll lend your insights as well as we lend our own. Our topic for today is Esther, Mordecai, and what happens when Jews really do control the media, and we're going to talk about communications in the Book of Esther. There's also a number of ways that you can submit questions to us, some of which you may be able to see on the screen right now. There is a talk app that you can submit questions through, and there's also, you can tweet at me, at Esther K, or at a Talmudist with your questions. You can also tag them with 24 by 24, hashtag 24x24. So there are lots of ways to get in touch with us. So if you have a question, please reach out to us via one of these methodologies. So again, communications in the Book of Esther. When Mordechai and Esther were writing the book, they didn't have GChat, they didn't have texting, but what they did have was a number of other kinds of communications that they used, and that we see them using in the Book of Esther as they wrote it down. And this is something that has been really interesting to both Sal and myself, because we are both writers. Sal is also a filmmaker. You've probably read our bios on the Global Day website. And we do communicate with masses of people every single day via social media, for Sal through film, for me mostly through writing, publishing, internet, all of those great things. And so the issue of effective communications, of clear communications,
Esther, let me just jump in for 1 second. Danny, you're screen sharing, and we're seeing you moving around various pages there. So you might want to put Esther back on screen if you could. Sorry, just want to make sure everyone's seeing it. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks for that, Sal. So one of the things that really interests us is how people communicate and how those communications are received by other people. And also some of the things that may be behind some of the textual things that we're seeing, that we're used to reading every year on Purim, that we look at the text and we don't really think much about the way people are communicating, but it is actually extremely important. So once we started digging, we really found ourselves reading the text with a more contemporary eye, and really looking at how people communicated then, how people communicate now, and what kinds of lessons we can learn from all of that. We tried to think about, like, who is talking and to whom, what kinds of methods are they using? Are they writing? Are they speaking? Are they speaking directly to the person who they're trying to deliver a message to, or is there an intermediary? Is the Megillah more akin to a blog, or is the King's Book of Chronicles, where he records all the things that happen in the kingdom, is that more of a Warren Commission, or is it more of a captain's log? Is it literal, or is it like only what he chooses to include? People who are overhearing things outside the palace gates, is that more like Twitter? We don't, all of these things are things that come to my mind when I'm rereading the Megillah, and I'm looking forward to discussing some of these sources with you. And Sal, who's in Israel now and has had a transformative journey of his own, in a series of transformative journeys, will also be adding a lot of his insights that are very connected to Israel and being in Israel and the contemporary scene with the media and how the media treats Israel. So I just wanted to give Sal the proverbial mic to talk a little bit about that before we get started with the tachlis, the mainstay of the texts.
Okay. So hello, everybody. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be speaking with you tonight. It's a little bit after 11 p.m. in Jerusalem. I've been here for a week. I think a lot of people are here from the Accidental Talmudist community. It's a Facebook page that people are new to. Please check it out. Accidental Talmudist on Facebook. Easy to find. And it's nice to be speaking with you live rather than just through images and text, as we normally do. It's amazing how much of the Purim story, as Esther was just telling you, takes place not in person. It's all done through messages. Messages are sent out to the kingdom by Haman, to all the provinces. Essentially, it's the biggest, most important, not just a nation, it's an empire. It's the whole world at that time. It's such an important empire that basically is the whole world. And at a certain point, Haman sends out messages that on a given day, a year from now, we're going to annihilate all the Jews. And later, Esther and Mordecai are able to seize control of that system in order to save the Jews. Along the way, all the important story points happen through messages. Written messages, oral messengers, as Esther mentioned. It's incredibly relevant right now because it's never been so dangerous to be Jewish. I mean, it hasn't been this dangerous since, I would say, 1938, when Kristallnacht happened. And in large part, that what's going on in the world right now is due to what people, the messages that they're getting through the media, and often through very irresponsible media practices. Clearly, Jews don't control the media of the world. If we did, there wouldn't be so much stuff out there that is to the Jewish people. And I'm very aware of that today as I sit here speaking with you, because I've just spent the last week in Israel in a really amazing program that brings guys from all, it's a men's program. The women's program was last week. The idea is to get in touch with it. Get in touch with God and spirituality and really reconnect. And one of the presentations that's called
Sal's audio is not so great for me, and I think maybe if he tries muting his, if he tries turning off the camera and just focusing on the audio, maybe we can hear you better. And if that doesn't seem to be working, then I will just continue on, and Sal will rejoin us when he's able to. But Sal, if you can hear me, feel free to interrupt me, and I'll give you the microphone again. So anyway, to continue, I'm really looking forward to hearing about Sal's experiences in Israel, which he will no doubt continue to share with us beyond the scope of this call at the Accidental Talmudist webpage, where he's been sharing a number of photos from his travels in Israel, and his community has really been very responsive and involved in conversations, starting conversations about Israel, which have been really wonderful. So anyway, moving into the first source, which if you have the source sheets available to you, if you were able to download them in advance, or perhaps we'll be able to see them at some point here. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Danny, our invisible text person who's helping us with this stuff. So the first source on here is from the first book, the first chapter of the Book of Esther. And it is the story of what happens with Vashti, that just in brief The entire text is clearly here. I can read some of it out loud to you, which I will, but just to set it up, the scene is that there has been a feast, and the king is merry with wine, which we all know what that means, and he commands 7 chamberlains that ministered to him to bring the queen before him with the crown royal, which is not a reference to any kind of alcohol, I don't think, but is he asks her to come with the crown to show everybody how beautiful she is, and Vashti refuses. Right. So one of the things that struck me about this source is that you can see I bolded some of it for it to be easy to read. But that the heart of the king was merry with wine. He commanded the 7 chamberlains that ministered in the presence of Ahasuerus the king to bring Vashti the queen before him. And the queen Vashti refused to come. So the commandment was to the chamberlains, who then went to Vashti. But there's a lot of missing information. Who knows if hi Sal, I'll get back to you in a second. Welcome back. So the king sent to Vashti, and we can assume that the chamberlains said exactly what he needed to say, but who knows what happened with the tone of what he was saying. Maybe he was like, hey Vashti, come on down, or maybe he's like, Vashti, I really appreciate it if you come. And we don't have any of that tone, and we also don't have Vashti's tone or the words that she used to refuse, just that she refused. So perhaps she was saying, you know what, I just need 5 minutes, Ahasuerus, I'll be there in just give me 5 minutes. And that did not get conveyed to Ahasuerus. We don't know. So there's a lot of missing kind of comments here. So maybe it's the chamberlains were just giving the gist of the situation. Also, part of what we'll talk about in a little while is the fact that Esther and Mordecai have written the Book of Esther. So they are telling this story. So they only know what they can know about that incident because they were not in the palace at the time. So where did they get their information? Do they have they have somebody who's like their inside source who gave them that kind of commentary? So there's a lot of those questions that specifically I wasn't trained to ask when I was reading the Book of Esther. And as somebody whose name is Esther, as you can imagine, I got to read this book quite a lot and study it quite a lot. But Sal is back with us, and I'm so thrilled, and so I'm going to transition back to him, and then we'll come back into these sources in just a second. But Sal, welcome back.
Thank you. Can you tell me when did I click off?
It's a great
How much
question.
Did you hear me say?
Very little. It started getting garbled kind of early. I mean, you said that, it never has it been more challenging to be a Jew, I think was where I lost you. Not because that was such a sentence that I couldn't understand, but because that was when technology enabled my losing of you. So. All right.
So we're just doing a little test right now. I'm good. You can hear me. The communication quality is good. Danny, you can hear me too. Everything is good. Okay.
Yes. Danny says yes.
All right. Okay. Very good. So, all right. Okay, so what I was trying to say is I'm here in Jerusalem. It's after 11, and it's so beautiful here. It's so spiritual. It's incredible. I've been on a high all week. I've been part of a program where they've been taking us all around the country, bonding with other guys who are reconnecting with their Judaism or taking their Judaism to another level. But we've really seen many things, and we had a presentation today from a guy named Seth Mandel, who tragically lost his son in a terrorist act about 13 years ago. Now, he and his wife have made light come out of that, really incomprehensible darkness by creating an organization that helps the loved ones of terror victims have a camp and become friends with each other and have a support community of people who are going through the same thing. But it's just so fresh on our mind, what's going on here, right? And there are people all around the world using the media to say that Israel is doing horrible things and that therefore anything that's done to Israel is okay. The media is being misused, and it's being used to attack the Jews. Okay, it's not paranoid thinking. It's really happening. We had another amazing presentation as part of this program from a guy named Khalid Abu Tomeh, who's an Israeli Arab journalist, who's won many worldwide awards. You can look him up. He's a guy who, is quite critical of Israel on some issues, but also says he would never live anywhere else, and is very critical of people who use the media to incite violence, because the peace is just not possible when people are being whipped up through the media toward a violent place. The really amazing thing that he said is that even though, he's critical, very pro-Israel, he wants to live in Israel, he doesn't want to live anywhere else in the Muslim world. And there's plenty of people in the countries surrounding Israel and in parts of Israel that are super critical of Israel. There are people that are critical of him, and yet he feels safer in a place like Ramallah than he does at the University of Illinois. When he tried to speak there, he was just absolutely shut down. Now, I know I'm mixing politics with a discussion of media, but the thing is, politics are formed by people's opinions, by large numbers of people's opinions. And if you control the media, you control the opinions of large numbers of people. And that's what we're getting at here. In the ancient world, the media, the system, okay, was these letters that were sent out in the king's name in Persia and Media. What made that empire so powerful is that they dramatically shrunk the communication time that it took to get a message from one end of the world to the other. What they had was the first Pony Express. And so rather than it would take many months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, to get a message from one end of the kingdom to another, it became a matter of weeks. With their system of fast horses and depots, etc., to get a message out there very quickly. And one of the first things that was done with this information system was that when a guy like Haman was personally offended by a Jew, he decided that this is the time to get rid of all the Jews and use that system of fast communication to get that done. And the message was, a year from now, we're going to kill all the Jews. And so the goal at that point became that Esther and Mordecai would have to seize control of that system. They couldn't stand by. Now, the manner in which they got control of that system, it's very interesting how so much of this story takes place through messages. As Esther was saying, they wrote down this story. They're teaching us something by the way the objectives of the story were handled, right? So now we're going to start speaking a little bit specifically about how messages and different types of messages are used in the Purim story. And then later we'll come back out and talk about this more macro level, what went on in the in the overall story and what we can really learn from that in terms of politics today. Now let's get a little bit more granular. I'm going to hand it over to Esther.
Thanks, Sal. So yeah, while you were away from us, we started going through the first source. So if the sources want to come back on the screen now, that would be great. There they are. So basically, in that first source, we got about halfway through. We're talking about Vashti and about her communication, the king's communication to Vashti, Vashti's communication to the king, and how it was all through intermediaries, and there's a lot of tone missing. And the fact is that Esther and Mordecai did write this book, so they only had access to parts of the story that they had access to, which were possibly what was in the public record, possibly from a source inside the palace, but we don't have that information. And as you mentioned, Sal, this idea, this massive communication system. There are 127 provinces in the kingdom. So it was Persia and Media, or Persia and Media, which phonetically to somebody like me, Persia, Media, press, media. There's all kinds of phonetically wonderful things happening there, even though the word origins don't necessarily support that. I did look them up. There are some connections with media and something being very widespread, but it mostly comes from the Latin, which is not from the Persian, as far as I know. Anyway, I think it's just a nice coincidence, and kind of still on topic is that last year I did go on Purim dressed as Esther, queen of press and media. So you can imagine what that costume looked like. I was wearing a lot of newsprint. Anyway, but I think that, one of the things that's been interesting about this communication system that Sal's talking about, when Haman decides to say kill the Jews, he actually piloted this program once before, and that's what this first chapter is also showing us. That after Vashti sasses the king and says no, whatever she says, the refusal is the word that's used, then the question becomes what is to be done with her? And there's a guy in
Esther, can I just ask, did you set up the story for people who are not familiar with the Purim story?
Yes, I believe I did.
Okay, thanks.
In what sense? What kind of setting up did you mean?
I mean, just for people who may not be familiar with even what we're talking about, what happened back then.
Well, I'm about to read the source also, which will help.
Okay.
So, on the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded the 7 chamberlains that ministered in the presence of Ahasuerus the king to bring Vashti before the king with a crown royal to show the peoples and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by the chamberlains. Therefore was the king very angry, and his anger burned in him. The king said to the wise men, who knew the times, for such was the king's manner toward all that knew law and judgment, what shall we do unto Queen Vashti according to law, forasmuch as she has not done the bidding of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains? And there's a guy in the court named Memuchan, who, according to the Midrash, is Haman. And I want to talk a little bit about his name in a second. But Memuchan says before the king and princes, Vashti the queen has not done wrong to the king only, but also to all the princes and to all the peoples that are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen will come abroad to all women to make their husbands contemptible in their eyes, when it will be said, the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. And this day will the princesses of Persia and Media, who have heard of the deed of the queen, say the like unto all the king's princes. So there will arise enough contempt and wrath. If it please the king, let there go forth a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes that it shall not be altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and that the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree which he shall make shall be published throughout all his kingdom, great though it be, this is a nod to the vastness. It is a vast thing to do, even with the Pony Express, to send a message out to 127 provinces. But he's making his point. He said this is important because all the wives, it's for all of the wives to give to their husbands honor, both great and small. And the word pleased the king and the princes. Of course it did, because he was just telling them, we're trying to prevent all of your women from sassing you the way the Vashti just sassed the king. And I hope everybody is okay with my using the word sass. It's not necessarily in the Megillah, but it's a contemporary lens. And the king did according to the word of Memuchan, for he sent the letters unto all the king's provinces, and to every province according to the writing thereof, and every people after their language. He was making sure that there was going to be no room for miscommunication. No, I don't speak Persian, I don't speak Royal Persian, I don't speak Median. Nobody had an excuse. Everybody would know what it was they were expected to do and what the king had commanded. That every man should bear rule in his own house and speak according to the language of his people. So this is basically Haman's dry run. Memuchan as Haman. The name Memuchan evokes phonetically the word muchan, which means ready or preparatory. Mechina is another form of it, as some people have gone to a mechina class or something. It's a preparatory class. So the idea of somebody who's memuchan, somebody who is readying the atmosphere for a big ask, for an ask. He's readying it in terms of the vastness of his request, and also in terms of the mechanics of the operation. So he's saying, this is not just about one person and one person. This is not one person doing something wrong and them being punished for it. It's one person doing wrong, and we should make sure that everybody knows about it. and that it's not just applying here in this kingdom, but in all of the provinces. And this is something that we should send out to everybody. We want to make sure everybody can read it, and everybody will respond to the edict of the king and follow it. And he's testing the message. The question of, will the king go for it if I say one person did something wrong and therefore we should make sure that everybody knows about it? And secondly, does the system work? Can I get that message out to all of those people? It's like a dry run of like a MailChimp. You do a test run. This is a test message. Thanks. You'll get the real one soon. But without that message overtly stated. So I'm going to pause for a second and see if Sal has anything to say about that. I feel like he's got something brewing about that.
I certainly do. And I got to say, because I'm in Jerusalem and the experiences that I've been having over the past week, I'm going to be changing some of the things that I meant to teach here. What Esther said is exactly right about this is a dry run. And I immediately become mindful of the visit we made to Yad Vashem just a couple of days ago, which is the Holocaust Museum, the most important Holocaust museum in the world here in Israel, where they've done an incredible job of literally walking you through the history that led up to and created the Holocaust. And one of the things, it's not that Hitler said, "I'm going to kill the Jews," and he started killing them. In order to make something like that possible, to make any genocide possible, you need to prime the pump, as it were. You need to start spreading that information that gets people angry and looking for a scapegoat, and starting to feel that by getting rid of this people, we're going to have less problems, right? So as Esther says, Haman early on is saying, look, get rid of this queen, get another queen, your problems are going to go away. The person who's pointing out somebody else's problems, right? There's always three people involved, right? If I'm the one who's alerting you to a problem people, I'm the speaker, there's a listener, in this case the king, and then there's everybody else who's getting whipped up, the audience, right? When I whip up an audience in order to help, and of course the person who's being talked about, right? So when I whip up an audience, when I tell the king that I'm going to solve your problems by getting rid of somebody who is dangerous to you, what I'm really doing is increasing my own power, right? So Hitler's rise to power wasn't he was militarily getting powerful, and separately he was saying that the Jews have caused all our problems. He was actually increasing his power by saying the Jews are causing all our problems. He's getting more powerful in the eyes of the people as he whips them up. And when we have a king, Haman is able to increase his own power by first saying that the queen is your problem, and now he becomes a trusted advisor and becomes very rich, actually, as he helps him find a new queen. And then amazingly, that new queen in the Purim story ends up being a Jewish woman. They don't know she's a Jewish woman at the time that she becomes the queen. We don't have to go through all the details of how it happens, but basically there's a lottery system, and she gets chosen, and she's the most beautiful and intelligent and pleasing, and the king ends up choosing her as his queen. Meanwhile, Haman is saying the way I can really become powerful is to point out to the king that there is a people out here that doesn't respect you, and that's causing all the problems in the kingdom. Never mind that this is the most successful and prosperous kingdom that ever was. Actually, there's a people here who's causing us enormous problems, and we're going to have a better kingdom if we get rid of them, right? And the next time I speak, I'm going to talk about what that message really is. In the Megillah, we have a kind of shortened version of a message that goes out to the people to whip them up against the Jews. The Midrash fills that in. But first I want to turn it over to Esther before I go into that source.
Got it. Great. So I just have, I'm also trying to keep an eye on the time. We're already halfway through, and we've got a lot of sources to cover. So I just want to, kind of like speed through the rest of source 2, just to give a quick summary of it, and then I'll hand the session back to Sal for source 3. But the idea in the second source, which we have coming up on the screen any second now, I'm sure. I see it's waiting in the queue and it's coming back, and it'll come back any second now. But I'll start reading about it just a second, just to try to speed things up a little bit. But we started with the source from chapter 1, and the next source, obviously, source 2, is from chapter 9, which is a little bit skipping ahead. But it's because that's where we learn that Esther and Mordecai are the writers of Purim, are the codifiers of Purim, are the writers of these letters that form the backbone, the bones of the holiday that we celebrate today. And so the source itself has a lot of has a couple of things bolded. All the acts of writing in the text are bolded, which, again, Danny, if you can hear me, if you could put the source back up, that'd be great. If not, then I will just read some of these phrases out loud. So it says, and Mordecai wrote these things, then the Jews took upon them to do as Mordecai had written unto them, that they would keep these 2 days of Purim according to the writing thereof. Writing is very big in this section. Then Esther wrote down all the acts of power, and then they sent letters to all the Jews, and the commandment of Esther confirmed these matters, and it was written in the book. And those are all the bolded things that are in that section, which is Esther 9:20 to 32, if you're playing along at your home with your personal Megillah. So one of the things that I learned from this is that the act of writing something down, and this is something that Sal and I both know as writers, that the act of writing something down is powerful and serious, and it leads to codification. It leads to canonization. And again, one of the things that Mordecai and Esther did, and they sent those letters to all 127 provinces too, which is a nice kind of symmetry. And if those of you who are, schooled in comedy, and also like in tragedy as well, not in tragedy in life, but I meant in tragedy in terms of the dramatic arc of a narrative, that it's good to have 3. The rule of 3 is something people talk about. So you got those three major sending outs via the Pony Express. You've got Haman at the beginning as Mumuchan, sending out to everybody about Vashti. You've got Haman in the middle saying everybody go to kill the Jews, and then at the end, Esther and Mordecai kind of take back the power, take back the media, and say, you know what, we're actually sending this out now, and this is our message. We're in control now. And that leads back to what Sal said at the beginning about how if you control the media, you control the message. So that's one of the things that I was thinking about. In addition, the fact, which I mentioned briefly earlier, is that Mordecai and Esther, in writing this, decided what we would know about the holiday. And that there are things that they may not have been privy to in a first-person perspective, but they may have had spies who have helped them kind of reconstruct the narrative. They were kind of citizen journalists, like reporting things as they saw it, kind of like how we refer to some people who are like on-the-spot bloggers these days. But they also became the historians. So the question that I would ask is, like, what might they have left out? And what kinds of things, how might that alter our perspective on the Purim story and on the celebration of Purim if we had access to all of those, like, those smaller communications, the first folios of whatever the Megillah turned out to be. And so then there are a couple of questions that would emerge from that. Like, if they actually edited things out, then did they use their power of the media responsibly? Do they act morally? And if you wanted to delve into the Chofetz Chaim, who had a lot of a commentator who had a lot of things to say about proper speech and how you talk about people. Are they in coherence with the principles that he lays out about what proper speech and proper communication should be? So those are all questions that I certainly don't have the answers to. Sal, I think you've studied a little bit more of Chofetz Chaim than I have, so you might have some responses to that. But I think that
let me jump right in on that.
Yeah, please do.
And let me start by saying we have a question from the audience. One of the listeners asked, you said standing by, an implication that a media consumer is passive, and yet being a part of the society that is influenced by that media. what can we learn from the Torah and from Esther's story about speaking out and raising voices in dissent? Listen, that's the most important thing, right? We've got to be an informed citizenry. In the Purim story, there was no press. There was no free press. The only information system that was being transmitted to the people was coming from the government. And we can see how dangerous that is, because if an evil person, if a person who doesn't have a straight morality seizes control of that system, then horrible things can happen. And the best defense against that is a free press. And a free press is doesn't just mean that reporters are free to write what they want to write, but that people are going to seek out good reporting. And in a sense, it's the same thing that we do in society. After a while, we get to know who can be trusted to say the truth without having their opinion too much influencing the nature of the story. But that wasn't present. It just highlights the importance of having a free press and of having a discriminating consumer of the press, right, which is us. Now, when it was seized and the message was sent out, so the Hafetz that Esther alluded to, he wrote many books on the rules of speech and the idea that you cannot speak evilly of other people. Now, this is just in our interpersonal relations. How much more when you're speaking about an entire people? How did Haman how did he expect to get throughout the entire world, everywhere that there were Jews, the local people would rise up and kill every single Jew? You have to understand this is what the plan. Even Hitler's plan was we're going to take 4 years to kill all the Jews. Haman's plan was everywhere where there's a Jew, in one day, they are all going to be killed, men, women, and children. Now, to get people to do that, even if it's the local police, the local soldiers, it's really going to take a local mob. Everyone in the town is going to have to rise up and do that. And to get the people whipped up enough to make this happen, you need a pretty convincing argument. And so now our sages are going to fill in what exactly was that argument that he used, and how is he able to so, fire up the heart of people that they would hate the Jews or any group that's going to be the subject of a genocide, right? How do you get them so dehumanized in the eyes of their attackers? These people are going to just say, oh no, we need to kill them all and we'll do it. You're going to have to use information in a very strategic, and somewhat evil way. And so our sages, because of time constraints, I'm not going to read the whole letter. The Megillah simply says that there's a people among us who so disrespect the king that, if a fly falls in their wine, they would drink it, but if the king touches it, they won't, which is an allusion to the kosher laws and some technicalities. But what the letters actually said, according to the oral tradition that we have, is that Haman writes a very long letter which says, look what happened back in Egypt. There was this large group of people. They went into Egypt because they were welcome there. And the king of Egypt did nothing but treat them well and allow them to participate in the building of his cities. And they were so ungrateful that at a certain moment they said, oh, we'd like to go out and worship in the desert, and we need a lot of money in order to do that. And so the king of Egypt generously gave them all their money. And then they left to go to the desert with all this money, and then the king realized, oh, I should get my money back. And so he sent his soldiers to get the money back. And this is all, you'll find this, by the way, it's Midrash Rabbah, Esther Rabbah, 7, section 7, section 13. It's numbered a little differently than the Talmud. But for people who want to look it up, it's Esther Rabbah. And so Haman goes on in these letters to say, and this Moses character, I don't know how he did it, but he had a magic stick, and he raised his magic stick, and the ocean parted, and the Jews and all the money of Egypt walked through. And then on the other side, he used his magic stick, and the waters came back and killed all the army of Egypt. And to this day, these people have remained evil and ungrateful and are likely to steal all the money and kill all the people and soldiers of a kingdom if they're allowed to be in that kingdom. And that's a very short summary of the letter that's actually printed in the commentary on the Megillah. But the point is that when you got to get power for yourself, you're going to pick a people to scapegoat, and the way that you scapegoat them is to dehumanize them. And you use language very carefully. Now, I summarized it all. I want to read the whole letter. I want to read a little bit of that text so that you can get a sense of how carefully the language is being worded so that it sounds so reasonable. And that's the key. Evil people don't sound evil. They sound enlightened and reasonable and intelligent, and they use all the tools of good speech to accomplish evil. So, for example, come and see this from the example of poor Pharaoh. What did the Jews do? When they went down to Egypt, Pharaoh welcomed them with a cheerful countenance and settled them in the best part of the land of Egypt and sustained them during years of hunger and fed them all the best produce of his land. And they were building at Pharaoh's behest. And moreover, the Israelites came with a pretext and said to Pharaoh, "Let us bring offerings to our God for a three-day journey, and after we will return. And if it is your desire to do so, lend us silver vessels and gold vessels and garments." And so the Egyptian lent the Israelites these things. You see, there's this tone, it just sounds so reasonable. And what he completely skips over is that the Israelites in Egypt were enslaved for several hundred years and made to suffer, and the male children were all killed at a certain point because Pharaoh had heard a prophecy that one of them would rise up against him. It's this misuse of language to accomplish an evil end by sounding reasonable, good, and enlightened. That is the big problem. Esther.
Well, I don't want to transition from using your powers for evil to a discussion about a recent AP headline, Associated Press headline. But since that's my next source, that's what I'm going to do. I don't necessarily think it's calculated or evil, but it is disturbing and annoying and probably indicative of the kind of challenges that we're having today in terms of the way the press presents events in the world, and specifically those happening in Israel. So some of you may know a friend of mine, a guy in Israel named Benji Levitt, who's a comedian and a writer, and has written a number of very successful posts about life in Israel for the Times of Israel and for his own website, benjilevitt.com. But one of his recent ones I thought had just like a lot to bear on this particular conversation. So, he wrote a piece called Top AP Headlines in History, and it's sort of a satire in that he took an actual AP headline a couple of weeks ago, as you probably may be aware. There was a driving attack in Israel where somebody drove into a crowd of people. A Palestinian terrorist drove his car into a crowd of people who were waiting for a train, and a couple of people were killed, including a baby and somebody who had moved to Israel to study as a Jew by choice. And Sal wrote a very moving piece about his response to learning about this Jew by choice who had chosen to throw her lot in with the Jewish people and then was killed by a terrorist in Jerusalem. It was very sad. So I wanted to just read this little excerpt from Benji's piece. And it says, yesterday, and this is Benji speaking, and he's going to tell you the actual headline. Yesterday, a Palestinian terrorist drove his car into a crowd of people waiting for a train. A 3-month-old baby was killed. At that point, only the baby had died. A police officer shot the fleeing murderer. The Associated Press found it appropriate to report the story with the following headline. They had a photo from the scene, and the headline was, "Israeli police shoot man in East Jerusalem." And the caption read, "Israeli police say they have shot a man whose car slammed into a crowded train stop in East Jerusalem in what they suspect was an intentional attack." And that sentence is so like roundabout in terms of what happened, and is so like in some ways under biased, and like their bias was to present absolutely no bias, so they stripped anything of like the reality of what had happened. And Benji adds, because he's a comedian, that he says the article in the article he proceeds to list other top AP, quote unquote, top AP headlines, including Noah abducts entire animal kingdom and Abraham Lincoln interrupts play. So these are, this is like, you can say it either way, but is there a way that's truer than the other? I'm kind of asking that rhetorically, but it does show the kind of power that the media can wield in just a simple sentence, just a photo caption. You have the ability to, and I speak to you as members of the global day of Jewish learning, and as in terms of not standing idly by, to really look at the ways in which you share information in the world, and to make sure that you're sharing is accurate information or clearly labeled your opinion. Because the AP is not saying it's our opinion that this happened. They're saying this is what happened. And there's a very big difference between those two things. And especially, again, with the reporting from Israel has been really challenging to understand what's happening by reading that and putting it in comparison with all of the reports that we are getting from our friends and family who are in Israel and watching it happen. So that's one of the things that I wanted to share with you. I know it's not a text from the Book of Esther, but I thought it was very relevant to this conversation.
Headlines are where most people are getting their news from, because so many people only read headlines, only pass on that simple shortened message, which is imprecise. Now, I have been imprecise tonight in promoting this session that we're doing, and I got called on it. All right, so Andrea Fraga on the Facebook page said, yes, there's loads of bad stuff circulating in the media, but I totally disagree that anyone should be allowed to take control of it. How biased can this get? She was responding to my comment that Jews don't control the media, but they should. Because she's absolutely right. No one group should control the media. The problem is that when there's a group that's being abused in the media, and their message isn't being reported accurately, that group has to rise up. They cannot stand by. You can't just say, somebody else will take care of it. There's so many watchdog groups, and there's plenty of people who they're watchdogs of the media, so I don't have to be. If you're getting a sense that things are being misreported, you do have to speak up, and you have to make sure that you yourself are getting good sources of news, and then when you find good sources, you now have the power to promulgate those sources more. Social media is amazing. That is something that did not exist in the ancient world, right? Other than, I guess, people just talking to each other. I mean, that was, if they knew them and could talk to them in town, that's how they could say, hey, that newspaper is good, this isn't. Not that there were newspapers back then. But this idea of standing by and letting things happen, I mean, that's just the most dangerous thing of all, right? And the lesson that Mordecai and Esther wanted to teach us about that, right, that they included in the Megillah, they included in the story that is told about that event, which was a miraculous event that became worthy of writing. It's the last book of the Bible, right? It's the last book to be included in the Bible, I believe. And it's the only book, by the way, that doesn't mention God specifically. The way that God is alluded to throughout the story is that the events are so amazing, so unlikely, that God is speaking to us in the language of events. But the actual people who are making these events happen are not divine, they're humans, right? It's Haman pushing the destruction and Mordechai and Esther stepping up to get things done to save their people. Esther is in the king's palace living as a queen, but really a powerless queen. I mean, it was a very, very sexist world, and even the queen would just have to do the bidding of the king, and if she dared to approach the king when he hadn't called, she could be killed for that. And she was very afraid to even approach the king to speak up on behalf of her people, because she could be killed for seeking to speak with the king. In fact, perhaps, I never thought of this till just now, but would not be surprised if that rule became a rule after the Vashti incident. It's possible, which would further enhance Haman's power with the king, with King Ahasuerus, and make sure that there's not a rival for his power in the person of the queen. So she was resistant to speak up, even though it was getting closer and closer to the date when the orders had gone out in the kingdom to kill all the Jews. And then very famously, Mordecai sends a message to Esther. He's not able to talk to her because she's living in the king's palace and he's outside. Right? He's powerless. She has some power, but is reluctant to use it. And he sends a message to her, and I think this was sent orally. He doesn't send this in a written message because that could create problems. He wants to make sure she gets it, and she gets it privately. And what he says is, do not imagine that you will be able to escape in the king's palace any more than the rest of the Jews. For if you persist in keeping silent at a time like this, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from some other place, while you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether it was just for such a time as this that you attained your royal position. Right? So it's an important teaching that you cannot stand by. If you're in a place where you can help your people, or any people that is going to be the subject of evil, you've got to speak up. Passing the baton.
Okay. So actually, it's really interesting, and obviously the point at which, for any girl named Esther, the point at which Esther ceases to be a passive part of what's going on and begins to assert herself is a very proud moment for those of us who bear her name. I think that I went through chapter 4, which is where the exchange that Sal is talking about takes place. That Mordecai says to Esther, you're not safe in the palace. Don't think you're safe in the palace. You need to act now, which is obviously just an incredibly reductive summary of what Sal just told you. But that all it does happen through an intermediary as well. And the text is very specific early on that a man named Hattach, who in some commentaries is Daniel, is Daniel from the Book of Daniel, but we don't have time to talk about that right now. So that Hattach is the intermediary between Esther and Mordecai for this conversation, which, as Sal correctly noted, they can't send written messages because they're afraid it'll get intercepted. But at a certain point during this, it says, Mordecai says to Hattach to tell Esther. Esther said to Hattach to tell Mordecai. And then at some point during this back and forth of the ping pong through the intermediary, when Mordecai is ready to say to her this massive sentence of just kind of shake her and say, you're not exempt from this order. Like if we die, you die. Then that's the space in which the messaging gets more direct. The messaging gets more direct, where it says Mordecai said to Esther, and Esther said to Mordecai. Even if Hattach is still doing the carrying of these messages from one to the other, there's a sense in the text that this is really where Mordecai and Esther are coming together and working as a team. And that's where the action, where Mordecai has been the active person throughout, he's kind of passing the baton to Esther and saying, I've taken it really as far as I can go, and from here it's up to you. And so that's really a moment that I enjoy a lot, because Esther really kind of steps up and tries to work within the limited powers that she has as queen to advance the directive and to advance the initiative. So that's my response to that. I know we're running really short on time now, so I know that there's something that Sal wanted to end with, so I'm going to pass back to him, and I think that'll take us out. And I'm always happy to have more conversations about this online. Guys can participate by going to the Accidental Talmudist page on Facebook. If you're not already members, you should check it out. And I know Sal will be parsing all of this stuff in the weeks ahead. As for me, you can find me in a number of places online, my blog, myurbankvetch.com, and you can also tweet at me at Esther K, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So I'm going to consider that my summary and my piece out, but Sal, I'll leave it to you to kind of bring us home.
Okay, thanks, Esther. Yeah, it's really been a very special week here in Israel, where everywhere you look, everything is 1,000 years old. And and what is it that's thousands of years old? What is this tradition all about? I mean, it's the history of a people, in many ways a family, because the people are all descended from a family. Even those who have joined along the way are throwing in their lot with the descendants of a family and joining that family. This people is a family. But what really makes this people distinguished is that they were given a Torah by God, in essence, a set of directions for good living, how to live a righteous life, how to live a good life, how to be a good husband, how to be a good brother, how to be a good son, how to be a good father, daughter, sister, wife, etc. So, and that legacy was what was completely threatened. I mean, when you threaten to annihilate the whole Jewish people in one day, as Haman wanted to do, you're threatening to erase that tradition and that source of wisdom for all the people of Earth. And why would Haman want to do that, except that wisdom cuts completely against what he's all about, right? What is Haman all about? I want what I want. I want power. I want to drink. I want to eat. I want to party. Whatever I want to do is right. Might makes right. Morality, a real absolute source of morality, undermines that in an important way. That was very threatening to him, right? Now, before I completely finish, I do want to pick up on what Esther was saying. I mean, how did Queen Esther make it happen? She had to be so careful. She couldn't just come out and, just as Haman had sort of put seeds of the message out there to see how it would fall, and then once the audience was primed, as it were, gives the big message, Esther had to do the same thing. She had to invite the king and Haman to a private banquet and really get them comfortable, and the king would feel that he could trust her and that she was a great hostess and that she was a great wife and that she was somebody that he could trust, right? And then the exact words that she uses, because he says to her, he's so happy with her and so content with her, and he says, okay, what is your request, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. And what is your petition? Even if it be up to half the kingdom, it shall be fulfilled. Which I think is an exaggeration. I don't think if she'd asked for half the kingdom, he would have given it to her. But okay, he's being imprecise. And Queen Esther answered and said, if I have won your majesty's favor, and if it pleases the king, let my life as my request, and my people as my petition, for we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, slain, and annihilated. Had we been sold as slaves and servant girls, I would have kept quiet, for the adversary is not worthy of the king's damage. And then the king says, who did this? Who would dare to sell your people? And then she says, look, I'm a Jew. Right? Jews aren't some people that are doing wrong in some strange place far away. Jews are people right in front of you, the person you love, your wife. And you didn't even see it because you had heard a message that was just wrong and inaccurate. And she's trying to get him back into a place of seeing what's in front of him, right? She's trying to teach him how to learn for himself, right? So ultimately what happens is he grants her request, and the letters are sent out, Haman is killed, and all the people who are going to seize that day to kill all the Jews are themselves destroyed. The Talmud teaches that when you prepare a pot for someone else, you'll end up being cooked in it yourself. But the story doesn't stop there. Our sages tell us one more thing, that once they had control of this worldwide media system that could be used to disseminate information, they didn't just use it to save themselves. They didn't just use it to save their people. They actually used it to do something else. So the Midrash says that Mordecai can be compared to Moses. Moses is the greatest prophet of the Jewish people, and for me, the greatest prophet of all time. People from other traditions will say one of. I say the greatest prophet of all time. He brought the Torah into the world. Mordecai is compared to Moses like this. Just as Moses taught you decrees and ordinances, meaning the Torah, so did Mordecai. Because Mordecai and Esther sent dispatches. It says dispatches were sent to all the Jews with words of peace and truth. And this is an allusion to the fact that it wasn't just here's the message, don't kill the Jews. Words of Peace and Truth alludes to the fact that they use the system to teach Torah. Right? When the word truth is being used in this context, it means that Torah is being disseminated through the system. It's an allusion to another part of the Talmud. For those who are interested, it's Bracha 5b, where truth is compared to Torah. Anybody who's teaching truth is teaching Torah. And why I'd like to finish on that is because I believe that's what we're doing right now. We're using the media that's at our disposal, which couldn't have even been imagined by them, a two-way street, it's like a TV, except we don't have a TV studio. I'm in my computer in a hotel in Jerusalem. Esther is in a place in Los Angeles. And together we're teaching Torah. We're not just teaching Torah, we're learning Torah. We're learning from each other and we're learning from you. If there are any questions at this point, we'll be happy to take them. And otherwise we'll wrap it up. But I think the important thing is take-home lesson, right? Don't stand by. Stand up for your people. Don't just consume information that might be misinformation. Be sure you're getting good information and support sources of good, unbiased, factual information. And when it is given to you, when you have the opportunity to learn and to teach truth, to learn and to teach Torah, do it. Do it. And so with that, I really want to thank you for stopping by and learning with us, and to Rav Steinsaltz for creating this organization, and everybody at 24 by 24 for creating this opportunity to learn and teach Torah with you. It's really been an honor.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.